In this video, I'll be talking about data flow in Microsoft Power Apps. Now, data flow is basically used to transfer data from one environment to another environment. Now, while using data flow, there are many techniques or many connectors which you can use to transfer the data from one environment to another. Now, with the advanced data preparation available in Power Apps, you can create a collection of data called as a data flow, which you can then use to connect with various business data. Then you can clean the data, transform it, and then load into the Microsoft Dataverse or Azure Data Lake Gen2 storage account as well. Now, data flow is a collection of tables that are created and managed in an environment in Power Apps service. Once you create the data flow in the Power Apps portal, you can get data from it using the Dataverse connector or Power BI desktop data flow connector, depending on which destination you want to choose when creating the data flow. Now, there are quite a number of steps to start using the data flow. First is you need to author the data flow in the Power Apps portal. You select the destination, you decide the how you want to load the data, from where you want to source the data, and then the Power Query steps should basically transform the data using Microsoft tools. Now, you can, once the data flow is created, you can schedule the data flow runs. This is basically the frequency in which the data flow should refresh the data. Now, you can use the data loaded in the destination storage, and you can build apps, flows, reports, etc. Data flows are created in one environment. Therefore, you'll only be able to see and manage them from that environment. In addition, individuals who want to get data from your data flow must have access to the environment for which it is created. There is only one owner for any data flow, means the person who creates that data flow will be the owner. Only the owner can edit the data flow. Authorization and access to the data created by the data flow depend on the destination you load the data into. Now, as you see in this example, I have a dev environment, I have a UAT environment. Now, when we develop any project, we first create an unmanaged solution in dev environment, and then we start creating an application. So you might have five tables, one application, five flows, etc. Now, you need to transfer the data from dev environment to UAT environment in some scenarios. Like say if you're using a master data or a reference table. Now, if you want to migrate the data from dev to UAT, then you will use something called as a data flow. So this is like a one directional transfer from dev to UAT, and then from UAT you can further transfer the data to prod, or you can directly transfer the data from dev to prod as well. Now, the connection which we are going to use, there are multiple ways through which you can transfer the data, but in this example I'll be showing you using the OData interface. Now we are going to use the web API to transfer the data. So let me first show you the scenario. I have this dev environment over here. I have UAT environment. So this is make.powerapps.com. And here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up, say, one table. Now, let me pick up a table, say, contact table. Now, if you go into the contact table, I have basically set of contacts. So as you see, there are roughly around 300 contacts within the system. Now, I want to transfer the 300 contacts from dev to UAT. If that is my requirement, then I will make use of that data flow. So let's go into the destination environment, which is Girish UAT. And here, let me search for contact. Now, if I go to contact, I can see that there are no records over here. So the goal is to transfer the data from one environment dev to UAT. Now for that, we are going to use data flow. Now for a contact, if I go into the tools, if I go into API link to table definition, here you can see this URL, API data v9.2, right? Now let me close this. And then if I go to API link to table data, this is the URL to access the actual data. So these are the actual data in the table. Now, what we want is to first transfer the data from dev to UAT. Now, for that, what you need to do, go into the dev. So first go into the dev, click on the settings icon over here, go to maybe developer resources, and then from here you can copy this web API endpoint. So this is the web API endpoint. I'm going to copy this. So because we are going to reference the data from the dev environment, so that's why we need the web API endpoint from the dev side. In the UAT environment, you can go ahead on the left hand side. You should see something called as a data flow. Now I don't see anything. I'll go to more, and from here I will click on data flow. Now, this is a list of data flow which is there in the system. Now I can see my data flow and all the data flow. Now, if I click on create a data flow, I have an option to import template or start from blank. So I'll click on start from blank. Now here I'm gonna write a data flow name. So this is contact transfer. Now, I'm not going to pick up analytical entities because analytical entity is basically for loading the data into data lake for analytical purposes. But this time we are just transferring the data from destination source Dataverse to destination Dataverse. Oh, I think I misspelled this, but that's fine. Contact transfer is the name of the data source. Now, data flow. Now, Power Query. This will open the Power Query window. Now, I have a lot of options over here. I can click on New. I can go to Recent, Azure, Upload, Blank Table, Blank Query. Now, first thing, I need to select a data source. Now, I have an option to select Excel, so I can transfer the data from Excel, SQL, SharePoint, Web API, SharePoint folder, Azure SQL, text folder, data flow, SharePoint, Dataverse, OData. And if I click on more, I've got many other things as well. Now, as we copied the Web API, now we are not going to select Web API from here. Okay, we are going to make use of something called as OData. So if I click on OData over here, I'm going to paste that URL which I copied. Now remember, the URL which you have copied should come from the dev environment because we are pointing the item from dev environment. So go to developer resources, copy this web API endpoint, and in the UAT, you're creating a data flow, paste it. Then you create a new connection. So I'll create a new connection, and data gateway is none. Authentication kind is organizational account. Click on sign in. It will authenticate you. So let me pick up the account. And here, once it is signed in, it will say you are currently signed in. You have an option to switch account, change the connection, change the URL, etc. But we will move ahead by clicking on next. Click next. And then it will load the screen of Power Query. Now from here I can pick and choose what items I want from the dev environment. Now remember, you are in the UAT environment, but the pointer which you have given is from the dev environment. So you need to pick and choose which table you want from the dev environment. Now for us we want contact. So let me type in contact, and then I will pick on contacts. Once I select contacts, it will start loading the information of contacts within the screen. So you have an option to evaluate which all columns you want. Now, I'm not going to do any further transformation. Now, this process is called the transformation. So here I'm gonna click on transform data, and then here I will be performing all the transformation which I need. I will say I want this column, I want that column, or I want that column in a specific format. So I have an option to select something. I have an option, if I do a right click, I can remove other columns, duplicate columns. So this is like, when you perform those operations within Power BI desktop, you get the same interface. Now, I'm not going to make any change. It has got around 296 columns and it has got more than 99 rows. I'll just click on next. So I'm just setting up that data flow. Now here in this interface, you will see contacts because this is one of the table you selected. If you would have selected multiple tables, you would have seen multiple tables over here. And then you can operate on that table like a tab interface. Now first selection is contacts as that's the only one table which I have. Now I have an option to load this to a new table. Now as you see in the UAT environment, I already have a contacts table. Now think about it like this is the first time you're doing it. Now, what you can do is if the table is not created in the destination environment, you can go ahead and create or load into a new table. But in my case, I already have the table, so I'll click on load to existing table. Destination table, I need to pick up the destination table. Now, here, I need to search for contacts. So that's the table name is contact. So click on contact, person with whom a business unit has a relationship, such as customer, supplier, and colleague. Now, once you select the from the load settings, so load setting is all good, go to the import method. Now what if this operation is happening multiple times? Say take for example you have say 300 contacts from dev, you need to transfer into UAT. Now tomorrow if someone updates the dev, you want that same data flow to run again and only copy the delta component, right? So if I added 5 new records, I want that 5 new record to be added into the UAT environment as well. So here I have an option to select the import method. I will select append, or I have an option to merge. Now, merge means like if the contact already exists, then I can update that record. Or append means it is just like kind of an insert. Even if you make any change, it will just insert in the backend, or maybe you can pick up merge as well. So let me pick up append for time being and go to column mapping. Now here it will automatically map the source and the destination tables column. And it has done a pretty good job. But for some, it might not be able to find. So like credit limit, it's just say it's a possible match. And maybe there might be some column which may not be mapped. So this is unmapped, preferred system user ID, Azure Active Directory. Possible match, this thing you can review all this thing, and if you're not happy you can pick and choose whatever other columns you want, but I will not make any change over here. I'll say I'm happy with this and I'll click on next. And the last step is to uh, if you want, if this data flow fails, you want that notification to be sent to the data flow owner. So I'll say send refresh failure notification to the data flow owner. You have an option to refresh manually or automatically. I will say manually as of now. So what happens when you select manually is the first time when you save it, it will run it. If you click on refresh automatically, then you have an option to schedule it. However, first we will run this and then we can schedule it as well. Now publish, I have an option to publish it now or publish later. Publish later will ask you to provide a future date time, but I will say let me publish it now. So you have published this data flow. Now your name of the data flow is contact transfer. Okay, so I misspelled over here. It should have been transfer, but I just missed that T. Okay, so this is now, this will give you like your data flow was published successfully and is currently refreshing. Now this is the name, this is the type, this is the draft status, this is the last publish, and this is the last refresh, and it says next refresh in progress. Now let me open the Power Apps UAT environment and then go into contacts. So I'm in the UAT environment over here. I've created the data flow pointing to the link in the dev environment. So let me go into the UAT environment, go to tables, and from here I will pick up contact. Now, earlier in UAT environment, there was no contact. Now I have created a data flow, and if the data flow is successful, I should be able to see the list of contacts over here. So I think it's a refresh in progress. Let's see what's happening over here. Show refresh history. So if I go to show refresh history, it is telling me action has failed. Now let's go ahead and see what is the issue. So it says identity user with ID does not create permissions to password health on contact, requested operation could not be completed. Identity does not have a create permission to password hash secured on the contact, request operation could not be completed. Now what has happened is maybe due to permission issue I'm not able to create that particular record. So for that what we need to do is we need to again go back and check what's happening with the data transfer. Now what I have done is I have refreshed the data flow. It was giving me some error, but I just refreshed it, and now again the refresh process has been started. Now when I go into the contact table, as you see in the UAT environment, I can see list of contact record being transferred. Now let me close this and show you what happened over here. So if I go over here, go to show refresh history. So the first one failed. I'm not sure why it failed. It has given me some error over here. But what I did again is I just went and come here and just click on refresh. Now, if you see the refresh history, the second one, it has succeeded. It says contacts, 304 contact has been transferred. Now I can run this again. Now how we can run this again is first go into contacts. Now there are so many contacts over here. If I go into the dev environment, so take for example if someone creates a new contact. So let me say I'm creating a new row over here and I'll call this as, let me pick up first name. Maybe let me search for name, say first name and last name. I'll say new row and call this as Tom Cruise. And let me refresh this page. So I'll filter by contains Tom. So it will list down the contact which has the full name or contains Tom. So I have added this record. Now this record will not exist over here in the destination environment. Now if you want that thing to happen, you can go ahead and you can click on refresh. Now, I have an option to refresh from here, or I have something called as edit incremental refresh, which has some calendar icon over here. So let me first click on refresh. So it says your data flow is currently refreshing. Now let it refresh. And here in the destination environment, I will say filter by contains Tom. It won't be quick, so you will not find that record. But if I refresh it, because as this is just one record it should not take long, but the creation of the data flow service, it takes long for it to warm up first and then it will start adding. Now as you see this record has been added in the UAT environment. So let's go into the data flow and check the refresh history. Now here, oh, I think there is some issue again. So let me go ahead and see troubleshoot. So expand all tables over here, and it says the operation attempted to insert a duplicate value for an attribute with a unique constraint. Now again, I have just created a simple data flow, but you need to ensure that you pick and choose specific column. Now I have selected all the columns. Now you need to pick and choose whatever columns you want. Now I have used the custom table over here. I have used the inbuilt table, but in your case if you are transferring data from your reference table from dev to UAT, you need to pick and choose a specific column and don't include everything, else you might end up with some sort of an error. Now, as you see, it has already created this row, but it has given you this error. Now, what has happened over here? It has started processing the information for all the 304 record. Now it hasn't taken the delta, it has taken all the 305 rows and then it has created just one row because that row was pretty clean. Other rows had already been created in the destination environment and it has given this uh, error message. Now if I close over here, there is something called as edit incremental refresh. Now, incremental refresh means anything which has just changed. So if I create another contact over here, so let me call this as Mark Stanley. So I create one more record in the dev. I need to transfer that in the UAT. Now I have another option where I can just say edit incremental refresh. And I will say, do I want a full refresh or an incremental refresh? Now I have already done one level of transfer, right? So I've taken the bulk 304 records, I transferred it into the UAT environment. Now I will use an incremental refresh because I just want that thing to happen. So it says choose a date or time column to filter by. Now I don't have any specific thing, so it is okay for me. I'll say refresh row from the past 1 day, 2 day. I have an option. I can say if this service is running every day or every week or every month, I have an option to select refresh row from the past and then it will refresh only for that specific period. That's how I can set up that incremental refresh. Rename, now as you know we have messed up with the name over here, so let me go ahead and rename it. So I can rename the data flow. So I'll click on rename and then it will rename the data flow name. Then we have edit refresh settings. So if I click on edit refresh settings, it will say refresh manually or refresh automatically. So I have an option to either refresh manually or refresh automatically, and I'll say refresh every 1 minute or refresh on specific days and times. So let me say refresh every 1 minute and I'll click on save. Now it says, please select a value greater than or equal to 30 minute because we don't want the service to run again and again. And even one service takes more than a minute. And that's why it is giving you that error 30 minutes. So if I click on 30 minutes, specify 30 minutes over here, it will allow me to refresh it. Or I can refresh on specific days and times. So I can pick up the time zone, I can pick up the refresh frequency and specify the exact time when I want that refresh to happen. So let me cancel this off. And then we have an option to create a copy of this data flow. So I can go ahead and create a copy. So it will create another copy of that data flow. And this time, this is called as copy of contact transfer. It is not yet published. So what you need to do, you need to go ahead inside the data flow, click on edit. Now you have an option to pick and choose the table, pick and choose the column. Like how we can do is say, if I go ahead, so in your, if you are doing this for your custom table, what you need to do is you need to pick up a specific column. So take for example, there is a job title. Now what I'll do, I'll just do a right click and I'll say remove other column. So it will remove all the other column and it will only keep job title. And I'll say I don't want anything which is of type null. So I have an option to remove duplicate, remove errors. I can split column, I can replace value, I can do whole bunch of data transformation and then I can perform this operation. So this is how basically you can use the data flow in Microsoft Power Apps to transfer data from one environment to another environment. Thanks for watching.